All right. My board, it doesn't look like it, but it's at an angle. And I try to get something to the equivalent of a bread pan behind my board. Let's say if this is an easel, but if I have if I'm at a workshop and I need to prop it up, get your board at an angle. It's very important because that will allow that water to run down and do the depositing of those minerals on its own, instead of you having to push back and forth with your brush. So the board's up at an angle, and also my palette is up at an angle. I like the palette up at an angle so that the colors will clean. The palette will self-clean, and I'm not always having to clean it and wipe it out. The pigments run down to the bottom, and if you notice on my, well, I don't have it open yet here. At the bottom of my palette is this John Pike palette. I have an empty spot right down here. This is the horizontal John Pike palette. All my colors run down here and deposit down here at the bottom. So if you look at this back here, I've got a bread pan. There's a bread, well, you can't quite see it, but you can see just the edge of it. There's a bread pan. Doesn't have to be a bread pan, but that seemed to be the right height. And it was sitting around here at my great grandparents' house and where my studio is. Notice that my water container has a wide mouth to it, because if you have a narrow mason jar, you will be putting your brush in vertically and coming straight up. Okay, someone's got their dog barking. You'll be coming straight up, and you'll lose all of your water and pigment there if you come straight up. Okay, I said I was going to put everybody on mute. I haven't done that yet. Okay. This is why we mute everybody. Okay, so you are now all muted, and you'll have to unmute yourself if you would like to talk. All right, if you have a mason jar here, you will pull up your brush straight up out of the water, and you will lose water out of your brush. If you have something that's wide, it doesn't, even just a Tupperware container is wide enough that, so then you can, let me grab my Tupperware. You know, even something like this. Okay, then you can scoop in and keep the water to the back of your brush. All right. Okay, so then another thing is, I discovered in my last workshop a new sponge that seems to work very well. And it's actually a synthetic grout sponge, Mapei, M-A-P-E-I. And I'm going to see if Gracie can find out how we can order some and get some in store here for us. But I like it. It seems to work well. I like either that one or the cellulose sponge. There we go. And it's a natural plant fiber. The one that I don't, there's two that I don't like though. One is a type of grout sponge that's kind of arched a little bit and kind of brown. That one won't take the water out of your brush. And also the natural sponge from the ocean. That's for lifting and something else. That's not for taking the water out of the brush. So it's always kind of fun when you find something new to work with. The Mapei sponge. Okay. Can somebody unmute themselves just to say something to make sure that I'm connected with you guys?
Hello.
Okay. All right. Good. So that's it. Any questions? And then on materials, the other thing is I have two mirrors off to my right, or you can use a handheld mirror. These are very important tools for me. because I get to see my painting at a distance and also reversed, which is seeing it reversed is really important because I will pick up mistakes that I had not anticipated or I had become accustomed to while I was painting. So if you have an error on the right-hand side of your painting and you look at it in a mirror, that error is going to be on the left-hand side, and it's a good chance you'll catch it then. You'll see a new painting. Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
Sally. Someone suggested, well, I was at the watercolor convention this weekend. Someone suggested taking a picture of your painting with a phone, lacking a mirror, and that could do the same thing for you.
Would it then flip it around then?
I'll have to try it and see.
Yeah, if it flips it around.
Wow. If I don't have a mirror with me, that's a good thing to do.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I would use the mirror, but
sometimes that phone can really change the
Distort.
color of your painting. So as long as you know that.
Yeah.
yeah, I think the live mirror would probably be best. But if that's all you got, okay. All right. Let's see here. Okay. All right, so what I would like to do is do a value study of this and the drawing, and then I will give you 15 minutes to do the same. So you should have all received the reference photo. Let's get the thumbs out of the way there. If you want to take a screenshot. This is just down the road from where we live, near the mouth of the Columbia River. Okay. Let's do a value study. And here, after 40 years of painting, I still do value studies. Some of them are not very, very complex. Most of them are really not very complex at all. But they help because I can see my value pattern, where my lights, midtones, and darks go. And that's what we usually talk about when we do a value study. But they're really more important than just that. It gets me into the zone of thinking about painting. I think actually what it does is it shifts my mind over into the right side of my brain. I find it very helpful. Now, I think there's some of you who may not do these, that have been painting for a while, and you get right into it and it works for you. That's fine, because the bottom line is that we need to evaluate the painting on its own and not how you did it. So, but these I find very helpful. Okay, so these are my shapes, but what's that going to, that's not going to do much for me. I already know though that my area of dominance is right up in here. When I took the photo, I positioned the camera such that you can see where the darker darks are at. The more interest is right up in here. It's going to be right in this area. Probably these Scotch broom bushes right there. So sometimes when I do take a photo, I will position my camera such as this one to where the composition is pretty good. Other times I don't have the time, or we're on the run, or I don't care to, and I'll just kind of get a photo, and then I'll work up where my area of dominance is. When I get back in the studio, I'll maybe crop the photo or whatever. But usually I try to position it with the camera and give myself a head start on the painting. All right, so 3 values. I'm going to try to do this painting or this value study in 3 values. I think you'll see that this is probably, of some of the ones that we've done, probably one of the easier ones of seeing that. Because we've got all this mid-tone down in here. Now, I might make these trees back here mid-tones also. Let's just try to do that. and maybe work another mid-tone up into here so it's not straight across. So we got lights, mid-tones, and then we have darks. Let's put in some of our darks now. The pencil that I'm using is a clutch pencil, and it has a Nero, N-E-R-O lead in it. It's kind of a waxy black lead, and I like it because it doesn't have the shine that graphite does. So already you notice that these dark shapes here are not the same size. They're not evenly spaced between each other. And there's another one back in here. Okay. So that's a nice distribution of shapes. And what makes a good distribution of shapes? They are puzzle pieces. They are, they're fairly large. They're fairly defined puzzle pieces. And the negative space, they're not the same size. And the spaces in between them are not all the same. If we get them to where the spaces between are too much the same, or the puzzle pieces are too much the same size, or if they are too much of a square or rectangle or triangle and not a puzzle piece, our eye will go right to them and it will feel uncomfortable. They're too commanding, too distracting. There are some paintings that I have seen, more of the abstract expressionist work, I think you might say, avant-garde work, where they do use the whole painting in squares, rectangles, triangles. And I would have to say, yes, if you're going to use it throughout the painting, then I think there's a possibility of those awkward geometric shapes. But for the most part, we want to avoid them. Okay, so now I'm going to also bring my dark right up in here. And as we get into this painting, you will see that I will talk about how the outside edge of the shape is more important than what goes on the inside. The character of the object is held on the outside edge of the shape. Okay, so I'm still watching that these mid-tone, the negative shapes in between are not all the same size. You notice I just joined this one right here, because these two were about the same from there to there. So I joined it right there to get rid of that feeling so that this didn't look like that one. Okay, so I always enjoy this part of the discussion about values, understanding values. This is repetitious to those of you who studied with me before, but it's so important. And that is to understand that the human eye can see roughly 400 value shifts in nature. Pigment can only represent about 40 value shifts, so 1/10 of that. And yet 40 value shifts is way too many still. And I said, bring it down to 3, we'll work with 3. So it's a gross simplification of nature that we have to do as artists, mainly because we do not have light coming out of our brushes, we have pigment. And we have to adjust and adjust the values to make a strong painting. Okay?
Eric?
Yes.
Eric, this is Nancy. And so
Yeah.
I have a small question. So I had a painting I showed in the critique where I had the trees in the way back. I had them dark, and you mentioned that maybe I should have made them light. So what made you decide to make your trees in the background dark?
In the background, I made them light in this one.
Oh, no, over to the right. Are those not in
over
the
to the right?
background?
Yeah, these are in the background. You know what, Nancy, I would have to look at your painting to tell you why I said that. Somehow they were coming forward, maybe, or they were attracting too much attention, possibly. I just have to look at the painting. Yeah, I don't
And so
know, but there's
why are you making these ones dark? Let me ask you
yeah,
that.
good question. Good, yeah, okay, good question. It's because they're okay. And this may have also been your problem with your paint. It's because they're near my area of dominance.
Okay.
And so I'm going to go ahead and have that strong value shift for right there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. It may have been that those trees that you had were away from your area of dominance and they were too strong by being so dark. Okay. 3 objectives that we have for a good composition, and it works very well for me. It's nice and simple, but it won't sell a book if that's all you write about. And that is, we want to catch the viewer's eye. Oh, you guys can't see that because I'm using the wrong lid. We want to catch the viewer's eye at a distance. We want to carry their eye throughout the picture plane. And then thirdly, bring it to an area of dominance and hold it there as long as possible. If you've done those 3 things, I don't care what rule, quote, rule you violated, you have a good painting, okay? Catch the viewer's eye at a distance. Carry it throughout the picture plane and then bring it to the area of dominance and hold it there as long as possible. Okay, so I'm just sketched this lightly in. I was using my number 2 pencil, which is what I normally use, but I realized I forgot you guys can't see that. So I'm using now my sketch pad pencil, my Nero lead. Okay, so don't feel you have to get every limb in. I just get it blocked in, about roughly blocked in. We'll find them with the brush. Okay, let's go until quarter till. Let's see if you can get it sketched on your paper. And then if you get that done, go ahead and work on a value study.
Eric, could you
Okay.
also
Yeah.
somehow put your value sketch in, because it was far enough away I couldn't really see it. Yep.
Let's see, maybe I can pull this a little bit closer.
Thank you.
There we go.
Sally, by the way.
Yeah, I recognize your voice. All right. And while we do that, I'll squeeze out pigments. I'll squeeze out my full palette. I probably won't use all the colors, but I like
What
to have the
colors
full
are you
palette there.
using?
All of them, the whole
Okay.
palette that we sent you, the materials list.
Hey, Eric, it's Patty. I had a question.
Yes, Patty.
So you said you could do this painting with 4 fresh colors. I was wondering, that's one of the things I would like to experiment with today.
Yeah.
What would you suggest for those 4 fresh colors?
Yeah. Ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson or crimson lake, that cool red, whichever you have. Ultramarine blue, permanent alizarin crimson, your yellow, whatever that might be. Mine's a cad yellow light or primary yellow.
Okay.
And then I would use a burnt umber.
Cool.
And Patty, what that'll do is that it'll allow you to really get some rich darks for those trees with the ultramarine blue.
Thank you.
Yeah, but you can use any 3 or 4 colors. The ones that you might watch out for are the phthalo green and phthalo blue. I do like to use them, but they are very powerful and can be a little bit overwhelming if you're not used to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Eric,
Yes.
hi, this is Pam. I wanted to ask you, John Singer Sargent has uses a very dark green for his trees often. And is that a phthalo green he uses?
You know what? I don't know what his palette is.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I kind of doubt it's phthalo green because I think phthalo green and phthalo blue, I know they're
Mhm.
man-made colors, and probably the man-made colors were not very prevalent back then.
Okay.
So I'm guessing that he's probably using an ultramarine blue
Okay.
mixed with burnt umber, probably,
Yeah.
and some yellow. That's kind of what I'm guessing.
Okay. I just find using ultramarine blue often gets a little dull.
Exactly. Ultramarine blue is a beautiful color, and
By
it will
itself.
by itself, yeah, and it will also give you a deep dark. And but you are so right that ultramarine blue, 2 or 3 strokes of ultramarine blue with burnt sienna, and you'll get a real
Mhm.
flat, dead color. In fact,
Yeah.
so much so, Pam, that I've even told some students to take it out of their palette. But if you don't overmix it,
Mhm.
it's really beautiful. So that's why when someone just asked me, when Patty just asked me about what colors for a four color, I kind of hesitated whether to say cobalt or ultramarine, because cobalt won't tend to do that, but it won't go, but it won't go as dark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just don't overmix it. You almost have to put it down sometimes separately by itself, and then the other color next to it, let them mingle on their own.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Eric,
Yes.
this is Susan.
Yes, Susan.
Would raw umber have roughly the same effect as burnt umber?
Yes, roughly. It won't carry your darks quite as dark as a raw umber could, but yeah, I think it would be okay.
Well, I can experiment with it today because I don't have burnt
Yeah.
umber. I'll put it on
Yeah,
the list.
yeah.
Thanks.
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to say I got paid for my art again.
Oh,
I-
somebody bought something, huh?
Well, I'm working with this studio that's a community studio, and they're doing this 24-foot sign with all about the surrounding towns as people walk down a rail trail. And they got grants to pay some of the artists, and I got $400.
Wow.
Good for you.
Yeah, I'll send a picture when
Good
it's
one.
all done and up.
Yeah, post it on the workshop, workshop page, the
Yeah.
Facebook page.
Yeah, and I just have to say we're using outside acrylic colors and they're driving me nuts. I wish it were in
Huh.
watercolor.
Okay, in about 5 minutes, we'll put the first wash on.
Eric, this is Rebecca. Can you put your value study up close to the camera?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, you bet.
I missed the fourth color. So burn umber, Windsor yellow, ultramarine blue, and
Red, alizarin crimson or crimson lake.
okay.
It's that the cool red.
And Eric, this is Rebecca again. You're not using rough paper, right? You're just using cold?
I am using Arches rough.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, but cold press is really good too. Hot press is a little too slick for me, but yeah, if you like the cold press, either or. I tend to like the rough because I like the feel of it grabbing my brush.
I'm using rough too, so that's great. Thanks.
Okay, in 1 minute, we will start the painting. Okay, let's rock and roll here. All right, so where to start in your painting? It's really up to you. Traditional watercolor books, you go back to the early 70s and before, they'll say start with your lights, put your lights down, then your midtones, and then your darks. A good way to paint, but it doesn't make total sense to me because if I don't know what I want to do in my lights, why start with them? And also, my lights usually, as in this painting, they play a minor part in my painting. The show or the area of dominance is over here. So why not get this resolved and then do my sky to support this? If my sky is put in first, my whole painting is affected by it. And I want it to be affected by my area of dominance. But it's a personal choice. It's a good way to paint, to put your sky in or tone the whole paper, get that going. But let's leave that towards the last on this painting. All right, so I'm going to take my brush. Let's see if we can get this up just a little bit higher here for you to see. And let's get my sponge right there. So for this demonstration, I have my palette up a little bit higher so you can see this. But if I'm painting by myself in my studio, that palette is right over here, just right off to my right. I've noticed that in the last couple of classes that I've taught that students have had their palette and their sponges clear on the other side of the table from them. Get that stuff close to you to where it's easy to work with. Okay, so notice I'm taking my brush and I'm hitting it against the bottom of my well of water here, and I'm swirling it around because I want to get water into the center of my brush. Then I hit it against the sponge because I don't want to take all that water and put it into my paint wells. All right. So Pat, I'm going to explain a little bit about this color mixing, but we can always go over it a little bit more. But I'm going to start with my mid-tone strokes right in here. All this yellow. And you can, I want to facilitate that yellow, and you're going to see why here in just a minute. So I'm going to put water over it because I want it to be very fluid. Now you might want to use a spray bottle. That will work too. The reason I use the brush is because I assume maybe most of you don't have your spray bottle right at hand. And here's a spray bottle. So I can squirt it too. This will help with the fluidity and the mixing of the pigment. Okay. Now, you would normally assume that if you're going to paint this grass, it's going to be yellow. But in order to get that yellow to look vibrant and exciting, I'm going to take a little bit of my ultramarine blue, mix it with my red, and it's going to be a very light wash. It's not going to be very dark. Take it again, red, blue, and I'm just going to do an S there. And I'm going to run it right in like this. Where all my midtones are supposed to be. Now, I could do this on dry paper, but I don't think you guys would be fast enough to get it up here. So I'm going to do it on, it'll start to dry on you too fast. So notice how my violet is not over mixed. You can see the bands of broken color there. Broken color means you see the red and the blue. And because my paper is at an angle, you see it starting to pebble out. That's the water carrying the pigment over the hills of the paper and depositing it in the valleys of the paper. Okay, so that's nice and wet. It's given me a little bit of time. And I'm going to take my cad yellow light, and you can mix it with raw umber, raw sienna, whatever, but I'm going to mix it with my raw sienna. And I'm going to let it run right into that violet for the most part on its own. This is what makes that yellow look really vibrant. It's getting the opposite colors flowing next to it. And don't go too dark. This is only a mid-tone, remember. You notice I'm not going back and forth right in here. I'm putting the color in, I'm letting it run down and mix on its own. I'm trying to let the water do the mixing. Grab. So I'll grab 2 or 3 colors here. Then I might just, there's a lot of water on the paper, so I don't really need to do this. But if it was dry paper, then I would grab a little more water here, pick it up, and then a fully charged brush. Now I'm going to go back and put the violet in over here. I rinse out my brush totally. I grab my red and my blue. I stack them on top of each other. Do an S, grab more water, pick it up here. And I let that blue and red run into the yellow. And since I got a little more red there than I wanted, I'll take my blue, ultramarine blue, and I'll just put it on top. But the water running down will mix that. Okay.
Eric, this is Mary Ellen. I have a question.
Yeah.
When you say you're stacking the color, are you stacking it on your paintbrush?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I will grab my yellow. Let's find some yellow over here. I mean, you can even do it. You can, this time I kind of kept my violet and my yellow separate, but I can grab my yellow and my red and my blue all stacked on the point, the tip. I do an S, grab, spoon up the water, hold it sideways, pick up the excess. And you can do it that way, see?
Eric Francois speaking. I can't see your palette where you do the mixing. Could you maybe move it towards the left a little bit?
Try to move it just a little bit more. Yeah.
Oh, I can't. How do I get our faces?
Oh, your faces, you got too many faces you're looking at. It's on the upper right hand.
I don't want to see me. I want to see your work.
Yeah. In the upper right hand corner of your computer, there's probably a button that says let me see.
Hide
If you got
thumbnail.
faces on,
It says hide thumbnail.
yeah, go to the left of view and you'll see
No, I can't.
these
No, I only see people.
just start pushing buttons in the upper right hand corner of your computer. You will probably find one that will get rid of all the people on the right hand side.
Some of the controls on Zoom only show if you move your cursor. They're invisible.
Yeah, you got to move.
until you wave your cursor.
So,
Yeah, you got to get the cursor up there.
Eric, this is Sally. I have a question for you. When I go to stack up the colors on my brush, I pick up, say, the yellow, and then I go pick up the blue. Well, I get the yellow into the blue. So the next time I want to use the blue with the red, I've got a problem. And why is it that you don't have that trouble?
Well, you're talking about you get the yellow into your blue in your palette, in the wells, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, Sally, there's a little bit of that cross contamination, but if I squeeze out enough pigment, the cross contamination, the percentage is so small that it really doesn't affect it. And if it does affect it, yeah, and if it does affect it a little bit, it'll harmonize with the painting anyways.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so hopefully you can get a rainbow of color like I showed you here. I showed you how you could put your violet down first, your yellow next to it, let it run in. And in the case of this down in here, I actually mixed all 3 colors on my brush. And did just an S, no, hardly any mixing. Okay. So you should see bands of violet. See the violet that's in there? That's what makes that yellow come alive. Yeah. I put my palette, I closed up my palette even for the 15 minutes that we took the break, because it helps to keep the pigments moist. If I had not closed it, that heater that's going on in the room would have started to dry those pigments out. All right, so now I'm going to rinse out my brush, and I'm going to start with the trees. And the trees, as we see in our value study, you see in the value study, are a dark value. Okay, so I want the jump from my lights to my midtones to my darks to be fairly even. In other words, if I were to make these trees about the same value as my grass, just a little bit darker, the jump between the light and the midtone, but then a very narrow jump between my midtones and my darks, these would tend to look like midtones. So I want there to be a definite jump. Since I've established a definite jump between my lights and midtones, let's make a definite jump between my midtones and my darks. And I'm going to rinse out my brush, and I'm going to grab my ultramarine blue and a little bit of raw umber, a little bit of burnt umber to drop down the value. Probably maybe put a little bit of yellow in there, a little bit of green, a little bit of phthalo. I got about 5 colors going here. There's no real formula, so I just kind of get something that looks kind of dark and on the bluish side. All right, so now I've got a little more phthalo blue in there, a little bit of burnt umber. There we go. And notice how I'm pushing. See these bristles on this brush, how they're splayed out? And as I go out, I let that kind of splay out those bristles just a little bit. And you get those branches. So I'm just using the corner of this brush. And then I come down in here where it's kind of dark again. Don't make them all even. See the light spots in between vary quite a bit. And I'm going to do the same here. And go ahead and leave a few little light spots in between. These are called sky holes. And because I really loaded up this brush, I was able to get a lot in there. See, that's all one brush stroke right there. Then I rinse out my brush all the way. I'll grab some of the same colors again. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. We can vary it. Variation's always kind of nice. A little bit of raw umber, burnt umber mixed with my ultramarine blue. Throw a little bit of yellow in there. All right, so now we've got a different tree coming a little bit. Throw a little bit of that yellow over into there. So I had more yellow in my brush than I expected. That's okay. Don't over mix. I just kind of do a swirl, and that's about it. Okay, now I push in again, and I'm twisting my brush to where the bristles kind of splay out. And it's the outside edge is much more important than what's going on the inside of the shape. Yeah, so that's nice. So there's a little accident that happened that I didn't expect. I got more yellow on my brush, but now we have a nice wash here of some deeper blues, but then we get a nice little yellow patch there. Okay, that's nice. We'll go with that. I also dropped a little bit of that yellow right down into my deeper blue right in there. Oops, maybe a little bit too much, but we'll just leave it. Okay, let's put a thumbtack on this to keep this up here. Okay. All right, now I'm going to move down into my dark shrubbery, right down in here, which is the Scotch broom. And it's a little bit of a different, it's about the same value, but a different color. So I'm going to run into my red and my blue. But you notice that this is, in my value study, this is all a dark. From my tree on down into my shrubbery. The trees end up here, the shrubbery's down here. The temptation is to paint them separate, but the point is that they're all a dark. So even though I'm changing the color slightly, I'll rinse that out. It's still the same value as the trees. This is about the same value. And so I am doing it all in one continuous wash because it's the same value. Okay, now whether you've got a little more green in yours than I do, that's okay. It doesn't matter. Okay, grab some more of this blue. Maybe a little bit of phthalo blue, a little bit more of that yellow. This is all dark, so I use less water in my brush. And I'm pushing the bristles into the paper so they splay out a little bit. If you don't have a natural hair brush, it might be a little more difficult to do. And so you can see my bristles are kind of splayed out. Okay, I'm looking carefully at my pattern here. I'm watching my value study. I've got one big shape I chose right down in here. Okay, let's put this one in. Splay out the bristles again. If this is really wet down here in your paper, then you won't come in for that second wash of water because you're using the water that's in the paper. You have to just kind of feel it. How much water you need in your brush. So there's another one right there. And then we have another one right over here too. Bristles are splayed out. I'm kind of pushing them into the paper. And we'll get a few of them down in there. One set of midtones that I didn't get in the very first wash were these trees clear in the background here. Let's put those in now. They're kind of more of a midtone. Different color, but a midtone. Okay, your biggest challenge is going to be try to keep from fussing with this and overdoing it. Okay, while this is still damp right here, I'm going to go ahead and this is my area of dominance. I'm going to put in a kind of a snag right in here. And I do that with a palette knife. You can use a credit card or your fingernail. And I'm doing it, I'm jumping ahead into the detail because this is going to be drying and I won't be able to do that once it dries. I'm doing right up here into the dark right there. Okay. So see if you can get a dark pattern going like that. And then we're going to start putting in some detail after this. Any questions? All right, maybe someone can unmute themselves and just say they hear me because I've got everybody muted. I want to make sure I'm connected.
Hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. All right. While this is still damp, I think I might just go ahead and put in a, it's not too damp, but it's going to put in a tree trunk there, maybe one over here too. Good enough. That's, you start doing too much of that and then you just ruin your painting. So a couple strokes of that scratching out is probably enough.